So I'll continue with the rest of the presentation in terms of what I will be doing now is introducing specific work that we're doing around the Ethnic and Migrant Minorities Survey Registry. So this will be the bulk of what I will be presenting, and I'll start just by kind of letting you know what are the learning objectives of this presentation. I will aim at introducing to you how exactly the Ethnic and Migrant Minorities Survey Registry was conceptualized, how it was developed, and what are the main FAIR principles that we use to structure the work around the registry. I will also be introducing how the survey registry and the metadata that it contains can be used and how it can be leveraged to ask and answer questions that are both research and policy oriented. And I will also introduce to you the mechanisms through which the registry has been set up so that it can be sustained over time, and it can be updated in the months and in the years to come. First, let me say a few words about who produces the survey registry. And I want to emphasize that this is a collective undertaking of a wide range of individual and collective actors that we could sort of capture within the umbrella term of the Ethnic and Migration Studies data community. And that this is a community of researchers that it's articulated on the one hand around the Ehtmigsurveydata COST Action, and includes a wide range of researchers and stakeholders that are particularly interested in quantitative survey research on ethnic and migrant minority populations. Several of them converge around the COST Action that I just introduced to you, where more than 200 researchers participate in one way or another in our activities and in the work that we do. And this is the kind of the largest community that provides the intellectual impetus for all of the work that we're doing. In addition to that, there's a smaller team of people who work with me at Sciences Po in Paris, and that are funded through Horizon 2020 project called SSHOC, Social Sciences and Humanities Open Cloud, which is a large infrastructure project funded by European Commission. And within that very large project, we have a task group based at Sciences Po, but also collaborating with data archives across Europe, who is producing a lot of the technical work that makes the registry possible from a technological point of view. In addition to that, there's a smaller team that it's French funded research in France that supports both the inclusion of all of the French data into the survey registry, but also it supports the technical work that it's being developed in relation to the question data bank. And that's a project where not only researchers in Sciences Po, but also in ED, a demographics institute in France, plus GISIS, the Social Science Data Archive in Germany, are closely collaborating. So the Ethnic and Migrant Minorities Survey Registry is designed to be what we call a FAIR in relation to survey data on ethnic and migrant minorities. And in a minute, I will explain what we mean by FAIR. And this registry has been designed against the backdrop of a growing demand for information that will allow us to understand various aspects of, on the one hand, the flows, the stocks, and the inclusion of ethnic and migrant populations in Europe. We have a sort of double focus of interest in that. On the one hand, we focus on migrants, and as you all know, over the past 30 years, the size of the flows and of the stocks of migrant origin populations in Europe and in neighboring countries has actually grown considerable, as increasing numbers of people around the world have actually moved to Europe and the neighboring countries for various reasons. On some occasions to improve their life conditions, but in other occasions to escape famine, persecution, or war. At the same time, there's an increasing acceptance and recognition that European societies are not socially homogeneous, and that the process of nation-state building has very often led to an exaggeration around the social, cultural, and ethnic homogeneity of European societies. In fact, the reality is very different, and Europe is composed by a very diverse range of groups from a linguistic, religious, national, and racial point of view. And some of those groups have become dominant in nation states, while others have become the minorities. So there are two different sets of populations that we focus on, for which issues and questions of inclusion are relevant. So our action and this registry intends to facilitate obtaining information that it's reliable on the inclusion and the integration of both migrant minority populations and ethnic minority populations. So we have embarked on this task, as I mentioned before, to a certain extent, because despite the existence and the theoretical availability of very large numbers of survey data sets on ethnic and migrant minorities across Europe, we that they are extremely underused because they are very difficult to find, access, and to reuse. Very often those data sets are either hidden, not easy to retrieve, or they have not been deposited in public data archives, and they remain only in the computers and the computer files of the people who have produced the survey data. In addition to that, we have over time we have become very aware that researchers from various types of organizations continue to face a number of challenges when they want to actually produce survey data on ethnic and migrant minority populations. And these challenges are relating to sampling difficulties, to difficulties with response rates, difficulties with the modes of interviewing, and the costs of interviewing ethnic and migrant minorities that might have specific needs, but also aspects relating to trust in researchers and data collectors. So against those kind of challenges that we face, the researchers that coalesce around the COST Action have proposed this survey registry as a public and open tool that will allow, on the one hand, to overcome the challenges in finding, accessing, and reusing data, but on the other hand, that will help us overcome, through learning by other people's experience, all of these technical challenges in producing survey data. And this is, in a nutshell, the main goal of the survey registry designed. Now, in order to make sure that the registry can live up to its full potential, we have actually ethnic and migrant minority survey registry by adopting the FAIR principles. And for some of you, this term might be new. FAIR stands, it's an acronym that stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. In essence, what these principles serve to do is to guide us in ensuring that the surveys become, on the one hand, easier to locate, and that we provide the mechanisms that will allow users to navigate through the information in a user-friendly manner, but also having a systematic documentation as possible. On the other hand, we have designed the registry to become accessible, so that the metadata for each of the surveys is fully available online, but also that each of the records for each individual survey actually specifies how you can access the data sets and the technical documentations and any other relevant publications. But also, very importantly, that we produce the registry in such a way that the metadata as such become interoperable, so that this metadata can be shared with humans, but also that they can be retrieved by machines through automated procedures, for example, set up by other social science data archives and repositories. And finally, obviously, we aim at making the data reusable, and this is achieved by providing metadata that is very detailed, informative, organized, and structured, and that the metadata, as you will see later on in this presentation, can also be reused for research purposes. The way in which we have constructed the registry is such that we followed a set of very detailed procedures. So we've worked collectively across all of those three previous groups that I mentioned in terms of the data community by first delimiting the scope of which surveys we would include and which surveys we would exclude. And this brought us to decide that we would only start from January 2000, because doing a larger scoping exercise seemed too complicated, because it would become a little bit of a historical retrieval, but also very importantly that we would focus only on quantitative and sample-based surveys. So we would exclude official statistics, and we would exclude qualitative data. The next step that we followed was to define very carefully how each national team should undertake the search process, so that we would ensure that the surveys that were captured, that were identified in each of the countries, would be very similar, at least in terms of the scope, and that teams were using exactly the same guidelines and protocols for the searching procedures. We also ensured at this stage that the metadata was collected in a systematic manner by producing Excel-based templates with over 200 metadata variables that are quite detailed and that all of the teams needed to follow closely. And finally, by establishing very demanding quality checks and control mechanisms through various stages, so that we can ensure that all of the metadata that we will share online have been properly produced, compiled in a consistent and coherent manner in each of the countries. And this is why producing the survey registry takes time, and that at this stage we are in what we call a beta version of the survey registry. By beta version, what we only mean is that yes, the survey registry is fully operational and fully functioning, and it has all of the core functions that we intended to have, but not all of the countries are included as yet into the compilation. As of now, we have compiled metadata from 18 different countries that are now already online. And by compile, I mean that we've also concluded all of these quality control checks. So the countries in green are the ones that are now already available online. Actually, yesterday, a few surveys more were added for Germany. So the number of surveys is slightly larger than the one that you can see on the screen. And in the next 1-2 months, we're hoping to be able to upload, because we're in the process of finalizing and completing the quality controls for a number of additional countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Cyprus, Finland, Italy, Luxembourg, Spain. So eventually we will have around 30 countries that will be included in this survey registry. We found that since we started recording the number of users to the registry, actually the registry has become very quickly quite popular. So since October, in little more than 2 months, we've had already more than 700 visitors across the globe. Naturally, because the data are about Europe, the largest share of the people interested in the survey data are from Europe, but a considerable number of them are also searching for the surveys from North America and a few others from Asia and Oceania. Now, I will be in a minute doing a live demonstration of how the survey registry works, but if for any reason the presentation, the live presentation gets stuck, I wanted to just kind of very quickly introduce the key functionalities to you with these slides, so that you can, at your own time, if you want, explore the registry while I'm doing the live presentation. If you see that the computer gets a little bit blocked or the sound of my presentation becomes a little bit patchy. So you have several areas for filtering. When you land on the main survey registry page, you get the full list of all of the surveys that have already been uploaded for all of the countries. So the more than 600 surveys are already located there. And you can do a number of different types of delimitations of searches. So you can do searches through keywords on a free text area. You can use simple filtering on variables that I will show you in a minute, which are the ones that we regard as useful to most people. But you also have access to advanced filtering options on 2 areas of the main page. Whenever you do any selection or no selection at all, you get a short snippet, a preview of critical information on each of the surveys. And when you click on the blue title or heading for each survey, you actually can access the full record of the actual survey that you're interested in. Okay, I will launch, I'll put there the link for those of you who want to actually try it for yourselves while I'm talking. But I will now share the screen in a minute. Let's see if it works. Entire screen. You see my screen? Are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So once you go into the main website of Ehtmigsurveydata, which is Ehtmigsurveydata Hub, you will find here all of the information that I was saying before about the section, the call up for applications, but also publications, information about the members and the events. The important part that I'm going to be showing you today is the Survey Data Hub link to actually speed up the process. I have the tab already open here. At your own time, you can actually read the information about the Survey Data Hub and the 4 components that I presented before that will form part of the Survey Data Hub. And you have here in this green button the link to the Ethnic and Migrant Minorities Survey Registry to speed up the process. This is open already here on this tab. The first page that you land on will provide you with all of the detailed information about the methodology that we've followed and who are the specific people and teams that have been involved in producing the registry. Very importantly, you have information about the guidelines, the documents and the training videos that people had in each of the countries to compile the data, but also you get here the full list of countries that will be eventually, or that we're hoping that will be eventually included in the registry. In blue, you have the countries that have already been uploaded, for which the data on the surveys have already been uploaded. And in black, the countries that we will be uploading gradually as the quality control procedures are completed. And if you click on any of the countries, then you can see a description of who were the individuals that collected the information for that particular country. Also, importantly, when the file for that particular country was last updated, and information about coverage. So what types of surveys have been included for that particular country, whether there was some specific sample size limitation that was imposed on the search to make the search manageable, and kind of more specific pieces of information. I think someone has the microphone on, so they will have to close their microphones. Thanks. And once you've had a look at all of that information, also about how to contribute and support the registry moving forward, you can actually click on this blue button, access the EMM Survey Registry, and you land to this page, which is the main page with the actual database. As you can see, as soon as you land on the page, what you get is the full 608 surveys that are already uploaded. And obviously, you could go one by one, looking at them and having a little bit of a browse of what the surveys that are there are about, and whether they are of interest to you or not. But because the database eventually will contain approximately 1,000 surveys, or that's what we expect, we think that most people will be interested in some narrower selections. Now, you can select in various ways. You can use the free text search. Let's say that you're interested in Roma minorities, so Roma, for example, and it will automatically reduce the selection, as you can see, from these 608 surveys that we have to 155 surveys that contain the word Roma. Now, as with any free text selection, you will need to then check which ones actually are about the Roma minority, or whether it just happens that someone from the University of Roma participated in the team. So as with any other search, those kinds of issues can emerge. But you might be interested in a particular city. Let's say that you're interested in only surveys that cover the city of Madrid. So you can write Madrid, and then you'll find the selection of 15 surveys that include such a search. So this search covers all sorts of terms that you might be interested in. You can also write second generation, if that's what you're interested in, and so on and so forth, to start doing selections that you're interested in. You can also choose, for example, to select only on the basis of the country. So Let's say that you're interested in comparing Hungary and Poland. So you can make a selection of only the surveys that have been produced in Poland. So you narrow your search to those. Or that you're interested in selecting surveys only that are longitudinal, so multiple waves with the same or partially overlapping samples. So you can do those selections, and obviously you can add multiple terms for your filters. So you can say, oh, I'm interested in surveys in the United Kingdom that are longitudinal, and I'm also interested in surveys that include only Pakistani origin migrants. So you will have a selection that is tailored to your specific interest and to your specific needs. There, into this very quick and simple filtering options that you have here on the left-hand side of your panel, you also have an option to filter through a lot more variables in this kind of larger advanced filtering window. Very importantly, for most of you, you might be interested in the topics that the surveys are covering. And this is what variable 1.13 allows you to do. It allows you to narrow your search on the basis of the topics that you're interested. Perhaps you're interested only in surveys that are studying topics relating to asylum seekers and refugee issues. So you can select on the basis of those. Or perhaps you have a narrower interest or only on asylum seekers and refugees, but particularly on their specific educational attainment, human capital, and skills. So you can choose topics as a way of narrowing down your selections, but very importantly, you can also use other variables, such as the type of variables that were used to operationalize how you identify the minority population, or aspects relating to, for example, the sampling method or the data collection mode. Perhaps you are intending to produce a survey that it's online, and you want to see examples of surveys that have used the same data collection mode that you will be using to get inspiration. So you can narrow your search to specifically what you're interested in. Once you've narrowed down your search to what actually interests you, in addition to being able to have a quick overview of what the surveys are about, here you can then click on each of the links, get a view of all of the information about the survey. So you can scroll down and read carefully all of the information about the topics. You can read carefully all of the information about whether the survey was included in a larger study, which is not the case in this particular one, but also how the ethnic and migrant minority population was defined in the survey in terms of the variables, how the sampling method and the sample size were designed. And also, very importantly, at the end of the whole fish, you have information about how the data were collected and the availability to the research community. So you will get here information about whether the survey data set is available. If it is available publicly, then you will get a link. I won't open this for the sake of time, but you will get a link directly to where the survey data set is deposited. You will have information about whether you will get access to the complete data set or whether there are some restrictions in terms of data protection. You'll get also information about the language in which the documents are available, plus where you can get the documentation and where you can get the questionnaire. So you do get a very large number of pieces of information that allow you to understand the data that you're interested in. Once you've explored the survey, there's a number of things that you can do with it. You can just take notes, or if you're good with computers, the registry allows you to download the automated information about the survey in these XML files that are computer readable, and which are offered in an international standard that it's called DDI standard. So if you're good with computers, then this will allow you to automatically read that data in a format that it's standardized. So it's a little bit like being able to download a reference for a publication, but a lot more detailed because it will contain all of the metadata for the actual survey information. Okay, so I'm back, and what I suggest now is that you can take a few minutes, and while actually you take those few minutes, can also answer some of the questions that I see have been posted on the chat. But for those of you, those of you who do have questions, feel free to write them now on the chat, or to just ask them orally. But those of you who don't have questions, Carles has actually shared the link to the registry on the chat, and you can start playing with the online search tool. What I would suggest is you can think of an ethnic or migrant minority group that is of interest to you. Some of you, for example, from your applications, we know that have been interested in doing a PhD or work for your PhD, for example, on Turkish origin migrants across Europe. So you can play around the selection of surveys on those migrant minorities. Others from the questions that you have on the chat might be interested more in other types of migrant minorities, like, for example, refugees, irregular migrants, regular migrants, and so on. And then try to design your search to fit to your specific interests. If you have questions in the process of doing that, I can actually guide you through how you would do it if you find it challenging. And then you can check out the information on the availability of the surveys, and you can ask any questions. Perhaps we don't need full 10 minutes for that, but you have a few minutes to play around. And in the meanwhile, I'll answer some of the questions that have been asked on the chat. I can see a question from Marisol Escobar regarding the population to be studied. Do the surveys distinguish among refugees, irregular and regular migrants, and so on? So different surveys are designed with different target populations in mind. So not every single survey will have such a distinction, but actually our registry allows you to search on the basis of those specific distinctions. So for example, I'm going to share again the screen, and I will show you, if I go back here to the registry and I clear all of the selections, if you go, the best variable to do that sort of search is variable 3.1a, EMM target population with terms standardized. And this is the variable that we have created with specific keywords for the groups. Some of them, as you can see, are based on origin or ethnic identity, but others are what we can call functional categories. So asylum beneficiaries, asylum seekers. You can also find categories for displaced persons, people who are dual citizens on the basis of socioeconomic categories. Also, first-generation migrants, foreign citizens, and I think we had a category for irregular or perhaps unauthorized. I think it's the word that we used. Let me double check. Here, unauthorized migrants. Well, it actually contains a typo, so I need to make a note of that. But if you're particularly interested in unauthorized migrants, this is the category that you would actually click for your search, and you would get the surveys that focus on those. So right now there's 3 surveys that particularly focus on unauthorized migrants in France, in Turkey, and that's it for the time being. But if you're interested in asylum seekers, as you've seen at the beginning, you can actually look at the surveys that are specifically focusing on asylum seekers. So that covers Marisol's question, I believe. Let me see. This questions about the presentations. Yes, actually, Charles, I don't mind people receiving the PowerPoint already, so you can send them the PowerPoint if you want. And there will be a link to the registration, yes. And then Marisol has another question. Does the survey include, okay, so this is important to clarify. This is not a single survey. These are hundreds of different surveys. So each survey will contain different questions. There are certainly surveys that include questions on political participation. And the way to find them is that you go into the advanced filtering. You go to the variable on topics, which is 1.13. And here, as you can see, you have all of the list of the topics. And if you go to topic, on the one hand, 1.13, like this jumped. Political inclusion and participation and social and political attitudes, you click on this, and then you get a selection of the 198 surveys across all of the 18 countries that are now included there that specifically focus on political inclusion and participation and social and political attitudes. So that include questions in the questionnaire that are sufficient to actually measure that particular dimension. Okay, sorry, I'm not sure this is getting in the way. Let me go back to see if there's anything else on the chat. Again, Fatima asks if there are questions on religion and cultural context. Yes, all sorts of questions that you have about what types of questions are included. The answer is yes. We've covered all of the topics. So you just need to look into this advanced filtering option and read carefully all of these different topics. So you have specific topics here on family, on gender, housing, health, human smuggling and trafficking, identity, income, interethnic contact, labor market, language skills, leisure, legal status, migration, political inclusion, public attitudes, return, social cohesion, space use, time use, transnational patterns, and accompanied migrant minors. Religion is a full category of its own. So again, you click on yes, and you can see the 158 surveys that include the topic of religion. Then Amy, how often is the database planned to be updated, and what do you feel are the missing areas in terms of subjects covered? I will be mentioning this in the next few slides. So if Amy, if you give me a few minutes, I'll be talking about that very quickly. Gabriela are you aware of similar initiatives focusing or including surveys in countries from other continents? So yes, there is one equivalent database handled by the ICPSR. So I will write that to you on the chat. The ICPSR is a consortium for political and social research in the United States. It's based at the University of Michigan, and the University of Michigan actually has a very similar collection on ethnic minority data. I don't have the link right now at hand, but if you drop me an email, I can actually share the link with other people. Now, I'm not aware that anything exists for other continents. So for Latin America, Africa, or Asia, it doesn't. We wouldn't mind partnering with people from those other continents, but the people from those continents, the researchers from those continents would have to find the funding. And we're open to including countries from other continents if national delegations from those countries in those other continents can do the work of finding the surveys. We can upload the information on our registry. We don't have an objection to that. So if you're based in Latin America or in Asia or in Africa and want to discuss that with research teams there, we are very happy to actually provide that. How were the surveys collected? Is a question by Kahina. Well, each of the surveys were, so if you mean how the original surveys were produced, there's a lot of variation into how they were produced. Some of them were produced through face-to-face interviews, others were produced through telephone interviews, others were produced through web-based surveys. So essentially all of the different modes of data collection that you can find on any normal survey have actually been used for ethnic and migrant minority surveys. Now, you would need to read the description of every single survey to learn how each of those individual surveys has been conducted in terms of the sample size, the design of the sample, how the migrants or the ethnic minorities were located, how they were approached, how they were interviewed. So there's no single way in which they were produced. There's a very wide variety. In terms of ethical issues regarding this data collection, all data collection on individual data involves ethical considerations. Actually, I would want to use this opportunity to provide you information about a publication that we have produced in the COST Action. So if you go to our main page of the Ehtmigsurveydata action and you click on the link Publications, you will see all of the publications that we've already produced in the action. And one of the documents that you can find is the first one that it's listed here, Surveying Ethnic Minorities and Migrants, a legal framework for collecting data and other methodological issues, actually raises some issues relating to ethics and to good practice of data collection when doing surveys to ethnic minorities and migrant minorities. So I would advise that you actually download this report that we produced that can actually be of interest to you. But also there's another kind of short leaflet that we've produced further down this leaflet called Guidelines for Surveying Ethnic Minorities and Migrants. It's a very short leaflet that will allow you to get some kind of essential tips of what you need to bear in mind if you're planning to conduct a survey yourself, and where you can find more resources. Yes.
Laura, I think you skipped one of the questions by Patricia Martuskelly. Dear Professor Laura, how are your experiences of entering in contact with people to have access to their database?
Well, it's quite variable. Some people are quite open as long as they get the support to be able to share the data openly in good conditions. Other people are more reluctant, and there's a lot of variation in terms of people's approaches to that. We also have other questions from Fatima. Can the level of education be a key to helping in collecting the data? I'm not sure what is meant here by how the level of education can help. If it's the level of education of the respondents, well, that's not necessarily a constraint. You can actually produce survey data with people with lower education or with higher education. They have different challenges when producing the data. And it's not necessarily an issue itself. Gabriela asks, she's studying Brazilians in Japan, and she was interested in Ehtmigra, that Patricia said the information, so that's great. And then, yes, Amy shared the ICPSR link, and Dimitrios has a question. Considering that existing knowledge on migrant integration in towns and rural areas is little, what are the inclusion criteria for surveys focusing on these type of spatial typologies? In terms of the sample size threshold, it really depends on the country, on the survey. So we are indicating that the smallest sample size that we're usually targeting is around 150 minority respondents, but we're actually accepting surveys that are below that if the survey is particularly interesting. Actually, it's true that we don't have a lot of surveys on rural areas because there's not that many that exist, but actually our registry allows us to look, for example, here on the variable 1.8b, if the survey has been conducted in a rural area. And there are not that many, but there are 6 already that have been included in 3 different countries, in Austria, in Croatia, and in Iceland. And their sizes, sample sizes vary. So for example, this one in Austria includes 327 individuals. This one in Croatia is a little bit larger, 395. This one instead is very small, only 53. It does vary what the size of the surveys for rural areas actually are. It's true that that's one of the gaps in terms of coverage that we have identified. Okay, I will stop here taking questions because I want to go back to the presentation. So actually, I'll stop sharing my screen. And I'll very quickly, because I'm running out of time, I wanted to show you very quickly what we call the back end of the survey registry, which is the key to sustainability. And this is relating to a question that Amy had about how often the registry will be updated. Our goal is that the registry can be updated on a monthly basis whenever a new survey is produced. So if a new survey is produced, we're hoping to persuade the data producers, so the people that are actually conducting the survey, that as soon as they use the survey, they will themselves individually upload the information on that survey without us having to centralize that work. If we are able to persuade the data producing communities to adopt this tool as something that will expand the knowledge about the surveys that they are generating, then we think that this tool can be self-sustainable as new surveys are being produced. So for that, I'm going to do a very quick demonstration of what we call the backend of the survey registry. You don't have access to this area, so even if I've put the link there, there is no point in you trying to access because you need a username and a password, and none of you have one. But I will show you how it works so that you actually see what it will allow people to do in the next few weeks already, because we're starting to allow people to be registered. So this is like a hidden part, the database that actually manages what you see on the front. So people will have their own email address and their password, and they can log in. Oops. Let me just refresh. Okay, so when you log in, the users log in, they are able, each of them will be connected to specific countries and surveys that they have produced or for which they have editing rights. So you can see here that all of the surveys are listed with the country that they refer to and kind of essential information about the name and when the record was actually updated. What people who are given access to this area, and because they are data producers, if they want to create a new survey that will show on the front end of the registry that you use for searching, is that they will click on that Create Survey button. And they will be able to create a new survey. Now, adding a new survey through this backend is like kind of filling in a questionnaire to select whether the survey that you're creating is still in draft mode or whether it's already ready to be put on the front end. People to see it, and this option of published actually is only visible for those of us who are administrators to the whole database. So essentially the users will be able to declare a survey either in draft mode because they have not completed all of the information about the survey, or to signal that it's already ready for inclusion on the database and quality control. And essentially what they will do is variable by variable that you see on the online database, choosing the options from these drop-down menus about their country. So if they're producing a survey that it's for Lithuania, they will select Lithuania. You have instructions then of which variables you don't need to fill in. Leave blank. This one will be assigned centrally by the Sciencepo team. Does the survey have an acronym? What's the survey name in English? What is the name of the survey in the original language of the country? What are the classifications? All essentially every single variable that you see on the searchable database is listed here, and they just have to be filling in all of these variables. It does take a while, so it takes between 3 and 5 hours, depending on how much information you can actually fill in. But essentially, it's an online sort of easy to fill in form that people will have to be producing. Once they have finished, they can create the survey, or they can also create and add another one. In addition to that, people who have produced several surveys will be able to edit surveys that they have already produced. So if updated information on a given survey becomes available in the future, just give me a second. If information in a given survey changes or needs updating, you just click on edit on that particular survey, and you can actually change information. So perhaps you made a mistake and you did not actually put information on the sample size, or the sample size was incorrect, or the starting date of the survey or the ending date of the survey was a mistake. You can actually edit that information, and it will be automatically updated on the searching tool in the front end. So this is the way in which we will be making the database sustainable over time. Now, let me go back here and finish the demo. And I'll just be concluding very quickly by giving you information about the next steps. Although the registry is now fully functional, and it displays the data for the metadata for more than 600 surveys for 18 countries, the next steps that we're going to continue to work on are, on the one hand, to open this backend that I've just shown you to external users so that they can start contributing metadata for new surveys that are being produced right now. So if you're involved, if you're part of a research team who is producing a survey as we speak, or have recently produced a survey, do get in touch with us. We will be happy to give you one of these username accesses, and you can actually upload the information of your own survey. Or let's say that some of you are PhD students and are going to produce a small-scale survey yourselves, so for your dissertation, then that will be also possible for you to showcase the information about your survey, even if for some period of time you are not willing to share the data. You can still make your survey known by sharing the questionnaire or sharing the documentation, but not releasing yet the survey data that you have collected for your PhD. So we're happy to support PhD students, postdocs, and any other data producing team. And we will also be continuing to add metadata that are compiled from the other countries that are still missing, because we're going through the quality control. And other tasks that we're still working on is identifying things that will make this survey registry more user-friendly and will enhance the experience. So if you do have any such sort of suggestions, please drop me an email and we will consider it. We cannot spend 5 minutes because I'm already out of time, but actually we have a minute or so. If any of you is planning, or your organization is planning on conducting a survey to ethnic and migrant minority populations, if you have any questions that you would want to discuss now in relation to how you can get connected to the survey registry, then by all means feel free now to raise any questions or any comments that you would want to raise either on the chat or just put your microphone on and you can talk as well. Anyone wants to say anything about this? No? Okay, I'll move then. Very quickly, I won't finish this part of the presentation, so you have the slides, and the paper is actually, the report is available on the website of Ehtmigsurveydata, but I wanted to very quickly scan through the slides to inform you that in addition to providing a good tool to actually search for surveys that you can use in the future yourself, the survey metadata that we have compiled through the registry also allows us to do very interesting research on what are the knowledge gaps and the strengths in terms of research, survey research on ethnic and migrant minorities. So we have actually produced a first report analyzing the survey level metadata for the 6 countries that were available already in April 2020, and we will update this report probably in January or February to highlight what are the research strengths and the gaps. I will be giving you a kind of very quick overview, and this is relating to the question, previous question by Amy, about what are the gaps in terms of topics. Now, you need to bear in mind that these preliminary points are based only on 6 countries. So when we include all of the countries that we have now, the picture might slightly change. But we've identified a number of gaps that are important, and some of them we think will stay there once all of the countries are included. For example, we've identified a considerable knowledge gap regarding the inclusion and integration of ethnic and migrant minorities in semi-rural areas. But also, very importantly, a knowledge gap in terms of cross-country studies. So the vast majority of the surveys that exist are single country surveys or single location surveys. In addition to that, we have identified that there's a lot more survey research on migrant minorities than on ethnic minorities. So there's an opportunity in the future to perhaps enhance and strengthen the knowledge that we have about specific ethnic minorities. And even if the diversity in the groups that are being studied is important and we need to maintain that, it's also important that certain groups are not missed. So we would advise perhaps future funders and future researchers to focus on minorities that are understudied. We've also found that there's an overwhelming focus on adults, and the focus on minors, on children, is very limited. So there's also a very important opportunity moving forward to try to cover better the information about youth and about children. So that's also a knowledge gap that can be improved in the coming years. But we've also identified in terms of topics, some topics that are very poorly covered. For example, quite interestingly, there are very few surveys that cover properly the migration paths. So what are the steps, the routes, both in terms of life experiences, but also in geographical terms, that migrants take before they arrive to the countries where they settle. There's also very little information on the surveys that exist about human trafficking, so experiences of human trafficking. So there's some areas that can still be improved. There's also a considerable lack in terms of the technical qualities of the survey, and a very large portion of the surveys are not considered representative of the populations that they are intending to study. So there's also a need to be able to improve the methods that we use so that surveys can become representative of the populations that they cover. And very importantly, from a technical point of view, also we need to try to improve the offer of the languages in which these surveys are conducted, so that the questionnaires can be available in various languages, so that response rates are not biased by language skills. Now, finally, there are issues with response rate, and this is an important aspect. Many surveys don't report the response rates that they've achieved, and this is not a good characteristic because it does not allow us to judge the quality of the survey. So we need to provide good training into data producers to ensure the data are being produced with transparency and with all of the necessary information. And finally, there are a lot of issues of data preservation. A large part of the surveys are not publicly available through data archives or even by request to our researchers. So what this means is unless public agencies and public funders take this very seriously and take it seriously very quickly, it will be very difficult to retrieve this data in 10 years' time, because it probably will disappear from people's computers and it will not be retrievable. So there are some of kind of the key points that we can extract from the first report on the basis of only 6 countries. We will be updating it, and if you're interested in following the information about the reports, the publications, the evolution of the registry, and all the other components of the Survey Data Hub that we're producing, you can connect to our community through all of these various ways. So you can actually check frequently our website, but you can also follow us on our Zenodo page for all of the publications. We also have a Twitter account, and you can obviously get in touch with us through email if you have any questions or any suggestions. The slides will also contain tables and figures from the paper. If you're interested, you can actually watch them at your own time. And with this, I finish. If there are any other questions, I can answer. So there's a question by Patricia Martuscelli. Maybe the gaps in surveys are also connected with funding possibilities and goals. Well, yes, to a certain extent they are, but I don't think that funding schemes are always so directive. There's a lot of funding schemes, particularly for basic research, that allow researchers to propose the topics that they want to focus on. There's a good opportunity for researchers to argue that certain topics are understudied and that they deserve being studied more. And I'm also not very sure that some of these gaps are not coinciding also with priorities, because I do know, for example, the undercoverage of rural areas. This is not because funders are not interested in rural areas. I do know that several recent calls for applications by the European Commission do want to enhance the information on rural and semi-rural areas, or at least smaller towns. So I think there is an opportunity for researchers to enhance the knowledge gaps in various ways, and persuading funders that other topics are also of interest. And a lot of private foundations are very flexible in terms of the topics that you can cover. So I think it's a combination of both, but researchers have agency in terms of steering some of these research agendas to a great extent, in my opinion. Any other questions? Okay, so if there are no other questions, thank you very much for your attention.